I believed in you. The greatest puppet I ever made.
Hey guys, Thingfishy here, and welcome to the first Lies of P build guide. So for the first one, I wanted to make a build that's as foolproof and beginner friendly as possible, to hopefully get some of you who might have given up on the game a little bit earlier than you would have liked, a chance to see the whole thing. So we're going to use a build that was found and used in the very first speedrun routes of Lies of P. The reason that I chose this one is, although it isn't perfect for some bosses, it's incredibly good for the ones that are most likely to cause you problems in this game. So while we're running through the first area, let's talk about something that I probably should have mentioned in my review video. Summons and consumables in this game are both super powerful, and using them together can trivialize most of the bosses. But I doubt anyone needs a YouTube video to tell them to summon and press square. So I won't be using them in this run, but if you do want to use them, you'll have an even easier time. So the first area, you just have to run through until you get to the Parade Master. The first two main fights in this game are an excellent tutorial for the rest of the game, so really try and get your perfect guards down here. I've included my inputs for this video, so you can see what I'm actually doing, as the character animations don't make that clear sometimes. If you want, you can slow down the video if you want to get a better idea of the cues for certain attacks. If you find it helpful, let me know and I'll include it in future guides. One thing that I want to mention is what is either an urban myth or useful advice that I've seen floating around the internet about perfect guarding in this game. I've seen it said that holding down the trigger for longer when perfect guarding increases the window. Now, my Sekiro reflexes are far too concrete for this to be viable for me, so you'll see me just tapping away throughout. And honestly, with some of the late game attacks requiring near instant double taps, I really can't see that this is how perfect guarding works. But if nothing else, if you miss a parry and hold instead of release, you'll get a standard block and some health regain. So it's probably not a bad idea for beginners. As we approach Hotel Crop, we can pick up our first upgrade material by turning right just before the door. Once you've said hello to everybody, start making your way through the next area. Now for this guide, I'm going to be doing what I usually do in guides and just rushing from boss to boss. So I'll be at the lowest level possible throughout. But if you do want to fight stuff along the way, you'll be a lot higher. The first stop is here when we run across this bit of scaffolding. Jump down the ladder and grab a Hidden Moonstone by this dude in the alley. Then through the rest of the level until you see this butterfly. Kill it for another upgrade material. Further on, speak to the weeping woman at the window. Then unlock the shortcut to the house on Elysian Boulevard. From here, down the lift and turn right in the street to unlock this gate. From the gate, head down the stairs and right for another Moonstone. Then into the alley behind it for another. Pocket watch back to Hotel Crop and level your weapon to +2. Now for the donkey. And in my review of the demo, I said that the best way to beat this guy is to break his weapon first, then fight him with highly reduced range. And that still is the best way to do it honourably. Or you can just sneak around him and backstab him into oblivion. Now for the Scrap Watchman. Before you enter the fight, head left to grab the Puppet Destroyer's amulet. This is a great amulet for the whole game. I love this boss. It's so satisfying to fight. Strats here is just perfect guard everything. All of his moves are very well telegraphed, meaning this is probably the best fight in the game for honing that perfect guard time. as some of the later bosses are far harder to read. The only attack I suggest you dodge is the grab attack in Phase 2, as I think it's worth having those extra frames for an attack that does so much damage. Speak to Geppetto and level up your P organ. Then head into Venigni Works. Run through the first area to the telephone for the first riddle. Now, I'm not going to go through the whole game telling you the answer to all of the riddles or telling you which options to pick for dialogue. The one important thing for this run is you do want to lie whenever there is a choice between the two. Then across the bridge and up the stairs to the Stargazer. Now through this area we need to pick up a couple of bits. The first is a moonstone right after this guy throwing bombs. So just run past him and grab it. Soon after, you'll come to this guy who drops a Motivity crack. The next stop is the Culvert Stargazer. Go through the tube in front of you, then head to the left. At the end of the Poison Swamp, there is a moonstone on the ground and a butterfly that drops one. If you need to, quit out to de-aggro enemies and respawn the butterfly. The next moonstone is in the shortcut off of the Rolly Ball Tunnel. Unlock the shortcut and grab the moonstone as you head back to the Stargazer. Kill the guys in this room when you get to it, and head into the first Trinity Sanctum to grab a quartz. The final stone in this area is in this room with the acid cauldron. Run over, kill this guy, and nab the moonstone in the corner. Activate the Stargazer, then speak to Venigni, and hit him with a Fable Art afterwards because you made very poor choices with your controller bindings in this game. Now for Fuoco. He's not that difficult, but he hits hard as hell. Based on my playthroughs of this game so far, I think he's going to be my Red Wolf of Radagon of Lies of P. Not difficult enough for me to actually bother learning too well, but difficult enough that it'll end up killing me more than the late game bosses because of this. Parries are your friend here, and keep it to one light attack between parries until you know the moveset well. There's a couple of combos here that look like they're over when they aren't, and it's easy to get caught by these if you're too greedy. For his red fury attack, simply run to the right to completely avoid it. Head back to the hotel and grab the Strike Resistance liner from Pulcinella and grab the Flame Grindstone from Venigni. We're going to use this for the whole game. In the next area, we want to head straight across and up to the highest point to find this chest containing one half of our weapon for the rest of the game, the Big Wrench. Then head through the tunnel and grab the Stargazer and kill this really easy enemy that definitely hasn't ever killed anyone in this game. In the next area, head to the right and jump down into this quarry to kill the two butterflies here for the next level of upgrade materials. Further on, head into this building, kill the enemies and grab an armor upgrade from the chest. Our next boss is the Atoned. There's an alternative fight to this one back in Venigni Works, but we can have a higher level weapon for this one. This is actually one of the few human fights that isn't made trivial by backstabbing, as her swings cover almost every angle. so a perfect guard approach is the slightly better option here. You could actually be fighting her with a +4 wrench, but to do that you'd need to kill Fuoco with a +1 weapon, which is rough. I tried it. Take the cable car up to the next area and run straight for the final stone that we need. Back to the hotel to level the wrench to +4. Now we're going to go back to the house on Elysium Boulevard and across the rooftops to get to this guy. Now, you can actually kill him really easily at the start with throwables, but if you want to keep it melee, I'd suggest coming back to him when you need to, because he's super tanky. With our big wrench though, he's really not a problem. So now we're going to fit the handle of the police baton to the blade of the wrench. This gives us a quick hitting heavy weapon with a Royal Knight's Resolve style buff from the handle and a devastating 3-stage charged up Fable. Make your way through to the next area until you come to this chapel and head straight out the other side to speak to Giangio and grab another armor upgrade. Then follow the path until you reach the Stargazer in the cathedral. Now for this section, and welcome to Lies of P's version of Anor Londo. By which I mean that this area is all about platforming sections where dudes are throwing stuff at you. Now, this may seem super intimidating at first, but actually, you can just sprint straight through. On my first playthrough, it took me many attempts to get past this carcass enemy here, until I realised that if you just don't stop and run straight through, he'll never hit you. Keep following the path until you get to this bit. Until you get to this bit where you can turn right to unlock the shortcut. Then up the ladder for another upgrade material, allowing us to take our weapon to +5. Now back up the shortcut to the mini-boss, and here is where we first see our build. We buff the wrench with fire before the fight, then focus on charged attacks and building stagger whenever we can. Now into the library and run through until you get to this room where there's a Crescent Moonstone on the left. Then through and up the elevator to see Solaire. Buy the Conquering Amulet from him, then back down the lift and to the left. Run around to the ladder and down to unlock the shortcut, then push the fire pit off the ledge to get rid of the acid. Head back to Hotel Krat and fit our weapon with the Motivity crank. And now for the first real roadblock in Lies of P. So your bread and butter attack for this fight is this double tongue swipe. You can follow this with a chargey every time. Although you can brute force this fight by spamming dodge and landing charges, it's worth learning all of the perfect guard timing in phase 1, as the real fight begins in phase 2, and it's so much easier with perfect guards. When he staggers, go for another chargey, take the riposte, then unleash the most powerful part of this build. Yeah, I started recording this guide on old patch where there was no hyper armor. I should have waited. Get through the rest of the fight using charged attacks whenever you can until you get to phase 2. Now for phase 2, we want to get behind him as quickly as possible. I find that the best way of doing this safely is letting him make the first move, because it will often be this one, and you can just run straight to the back. Now his phase 2 moveset is very similar to phase 1, just a little more ferocious. Happily, we're not going to have to actually fight him that much past the initial stagger. Get in your perfect guards until you get that stagger. Then repeat the same routine as phase 1. and yeah, that's half the health bar gone in one string of attacks. After this, he'll go for that big AoE attack. Just stick by his right foot and you'll miss both the laser beam and the slam attacks. From here, a couple more charges and we're there. Next up, we have the forest area. Run through until you get to the town slums. In here, you'll find a lift that takes us up to unlock a shortcut right next to the Stargazer. I'm sure I played another game where you went up a lift to unlock a shortcut in a wooded area. Can't remember what that was. When you come back down the lift, jump out early and kill these two guys on the roof. Because now we're going to kill the mini boss here. We're going to jump down, wait for him to burst through and delete half of his health bar with our big charged Fable. If you don't have Fable though, you can stagger him with a few charges and do most of your damage in that riposte string. There's a good armor upgrade in the shack nearby. Now we run through the next couple of areas until we get to Marlem. We want to grab the quartz in the chest when we get to this bonfire. Then just before you get to the Red Lobster Inn, take a left to grab a weapon behind what I think might be the most dangerous dog enemies in any Souls or Souls-like game. And now for the first fight with the Black Rabbit Brotherhood. So this build is actually so powerful that it can get you in trouble here. If you attack between parries and take the riposte into our Fable art, you can actually do so much damage that you end up with all 4 enemies in the arena at once. We want to avoid that. So for the first part of the fight, we want to focus purely on breaking his weapon. So parry only, no attacks. When he staggers, 2 charges into a Fable. Now, for the annoying one, once again we're going to focus on running around for backstabs. Try to keep an eye on the big guy as much as you can, as with his weapon still intact, he's still pretty dangerous. When she's dead, back to parries to finally break that weapon. Now, once his weapon is broken, you're pretty much out of the danger zone, as long as you don't have an absolute nightmare. Nothing does that much damage now, so backstab the next 2 guys, then finally break the big guy's posture one final time for the win. Now to Rosa Isabelle Street, and all the way through to the White Lady. Not much to say here, backstabs for the win. Speak to Julian, then head through the tunnels. You want to be slightly wary at this point because NeoWiz decided to go with the classic make the most dangerous enemy in the game a random puppet in a sewer method. Seriously, don't fight that thing. In the next area, you'll find the wedding ring on a corpse. Grab this for later, and then run through the next area, right past Fatty, and light the Stargazer behind him. Shout out to all the people like me who never realised there was a Stargazer next to him on their first playthrough. Sneak up on him for a cheeky Fable, then parries and charges for posture damage. Now, I can't stress this enough, this long combo he does has a follow-up at the end, so don't get caught by it every single time like I do. Now into the Opera House. And I tried keeping this guide free from skips and glitches and saving them for future videos, but I really couldn't resist this one. When you get to the swinging chandelier, run down these stairs and jump onto the ledge to drop down and unlock the shortcut immediately. Before we head into the boss, head back to Julian at the Culvert Stargazer and give him the wedding ring. Now to the City Hall Stargazer where we fought the Scrap Watchman. Head back out of the building and to the left to bully this guy for the puppet doll. Then back to the house on Elysium Boulevard and across the rooftops to give it to the Weeping Woman. Now for the first big fight of the run, the King of Puppets. In phase 1, your bread and butter attack is this one. Wait for him to do the spin, then parry that descending attack, then do an R1. Sometimes he'll leave it there, but when he does the follow-up, parry the second and do a charged R2. For phase 2, we only need to survive long enough to break his posture. When it breaks, charges and a riposte. And now for Romeo, one of the toughest fights in the entire game. And for this one, you're going to have to get good, memorize all of his attack patterns, and learn exactly how to respond to all of those devastating attacks. Nah, just kidding. But you would have to do that if you weren't running this build. Now into the Lorenzini Arcade. We don't need to pick anything up in this area until you find this room with this puppet sitting down. For the easiest method here, chuck some consumables at the puppets without entering the room, then you'll be able to kill this butterfly on your first try. The Elite here is one of the enemies that was most notably changed in the first big update for Lies of P. He's far less stressful than he was on original patch. Charges and parries here for the win. And now for everyone's favourite mini-boss, the Jester. But don't panic, because we're going to take away over half of his health bar with our very first attack. Run up to the barrels, keeping slightly right, and wind up your Fable. Imagine if I was good at this game. Okay, so if the worst happens, the good news is, it's pretty easy to break this guy's weapon with parries, and he seems much more staggerable now than he was on original patch. And you can always rely on your trusty carcass friends to help out if needed. Straight after him, grab the wine from the cabinet on your way out of the cellar. Now head towards the grand exhibition until you reach the Grace indoors. When you do, head down the hallway to the left and in behind this curtain, just as you get to the drill guy for a weapon upgrade. After this, back to the Rosa Isabelle Stargazer. Run forward and then take the road to the left. Keep to your left until you find another lady in a window, who on receiving this bottle of wine we just picked up in the cellar, will give you an item. You can take this back to Pulcinella in the round table hold to grab another upgrade material. The only things that we need to grab in the Grand Exhibition are found when you get to this outside area. Down the ladder and bonk this guy to death for the strength ring. Then grab the quartz from the chest next to him. From there, head through the rest of the level until you reach the shortcut to the next boss fight.
Now I fight the Horror Warrior!
For Horaloo, this is the first fight in the run where we really don't want to be parrying. Dodging this boss is so much easier and it gives you so many more attack opportunities. Stick to R1s between his attacks if you're still learning the moveset, but there's actually a lot of space for charged R2s once you're familiar with it. When you're done, get a quick glimpse of this very non-problematic looking enemy and enjoy some lore. Now the next boss in the run is where the difficulty really steps up a notch, so we're going to beef up our character a bit in preparation. First, head all the way back to the cathedral to where this platforming section was. Push the fire pit at the top off of the rafters. If you head down to the bottom now, you'll find a cool underground room with a quartz hidden inside. Then back to the tunnels by the Rosa Isabelle Street culvert stargazer and drop down into the hole. Follow the path until you find this guy guarding a chest with some quartz in. Then back to the Venigni factory to kill the puppet of the future that we ran past earlier. Now into the swamp area. Run through until you come to this section where you find a Half Moonstone on the mound. Then to the area with the two puppets of the future for another near the left one. Then we're going to kill both of these bosses for 2 extra quartz. Now through the next area with the boulder to kill the butterfly on this ramp for the final Half Moonstone. And now for the swamp monster. And there's absolutely no getting around this. This fight will require a little getting good to break his posture. So parry him until you get a stagger. Now one of the skills that we just picked up with our quartz is an extra fable slot. This allows us to buff our handle with that Royal Knight's Resolve style buff before we do our full fable charged attack. You can do this earlier in the run, by the way, if you'd like, but I went more towards survivability than damage. So when you get the stagger, take the riposte, buff with the handle fable, then do your 3-stage charge fable. So in both phases of this fight, if you can parry and hit charged attacks enough to get a stagger, this fight will be far shorter than a standard build. We're effectively wiping out half of his health bar in both phases. The attacks you really have to avoid from this boss are the decay ones, especially the swamp noodles. He'll always do this little head shake before he does either of the decay attacks, so make sure you recognise this warning. Also, my advice for parrying charging attacks in this game: wait until the enemy looks like it's actually touching your character. This seems a little scary, but you'll be far closer to the needed timing than going any earlier. Phase 2 is very similar to the Scrap Watchman fight, with the addition of some Swamp Noodle attacks here and there. This little follow-up is very common, so it's worth learning to parry. When he flips over and goes full Swamp Noodle mode, just spam dodge backwards to get clear. Now we're back to the train station. The only thing we need to grab from here is the amulet dropped by this big scorpion enemy. Unless I've just been incredibly lucky on my playthroughs, this is probably the only enemy in Lies of P that looks far more formidable than he actually is. The next boss is Robber Weasel, so backstabs again for an easy win. Through the next area, bully the guy knocking on the door, and head into Crumbling Crop. The next elite is a required boss, and if you have PTSD from fighting this guy on original patch, don't worry, he's been nerfed quite a lot. The next boss is the Walker of Illusion, one of the few bosses in the game that I haven't really learned properly yet. But I'm going to save that for my 2 dragons build, because you do not need to know this boss on this build. Charge up a buffed Fable Art to do 1/3 of his health bar right at the start of the fight. Kill the summon, then get in some parries on those well telegraphed attacks, and brute force some charges for a stagger. After that, we're pretty much done. Next up is the Corrupted Parade Master, and the first part of this fight is almost identical to the earlier one, so parries and charges as normal. Phase 2 can be a little more problematic as he's joined by some hats. But you don't need to worry about any of that, because here is how Phase 2 is going to go with this build. After this, you can finally level up your weapon to max. And now we're into the endgame. And coming up is a fight that I was pretty scathing about in my review of this game a couple of weeks back. But I have to say now, I actually really like this fight. I suppose you could assume that the reason for that unlikely change of heart is that between making my review video and editing this one, I played another game that had boss fights so terrible it made this one feel like Slave Knight Gale. You could assume that. It doesn't necessarily mean that's what happened, but you could assume it. For this fight, you want to take it really slow and go for backstabs on whatever enemy is aggro to you. Kill one of them first, and then get the other 2 to very low health. Unfortunately, sometimes the one you need to hit is passive, and you just have to run around the arena until the aggro swaps. Happily, when this does happen, there isn't a giant crow throwing super annoying AoEs at you, because imagine how when they're down to a smidge of health each, kill them, buff up, and hit the big guy with our big old Fable. Then it's just a case of parries and charges for the second half of the big boy's health bar. And now we make it to the Isle. I'm deliberately not going to show too much of this area because we have nothing to grab and I don't want to spoil it if you haven't made it this far yet. So our first boss is the Door Guardian, arguably one of the less interesting bosses in this game. I find dodging him rather than parrying a little easier. Unfortunately for our big bonky wrench, it doesn't do much for us here, in terms of that Fable attack. So just go for his right leg and take riposte for big damage when you can. And now it's time for what is, in my opinion, the best part of Lies of P, and the best non-From Software boss there is. Lies of P's answer to Sister Frida, Lady Maria, and Melania. Laxasia. For anyone who didn't pick up on my spoiler-avoiding sarcasm in my review video, this is not an easy boss. She's the hardest fight in the game by far, and she'd probably make the top 10 even on a From Software list. Now, fighting her by dodging is arguably a little easier, but learning to parry this boss took me 12 hours, and it was definitely the most fun I've had in a video game this year. The upside to parrying is if you can do it accurately, you can break her stance much more quickly than just dodging and attacking. And I want to show you a really cool mechanic that you might not know about here. Laxasia's weapon, like most other boss weapons, can be broken. Her sword has 3,840 health points, and you take away 60 every time you perfect guard, meaning that if you successfully parry her 63 times, her sword breaks and it insta-kills her phase 1. Meaning that phase 1 Laxasia is the only Souls boss who can be defeated just by parrying her. I won't lie, when I first discovered this while I was practicing, I got a little sidetracked doing it over and over again, and it's my new favourite thing to do in this game. It's definitely not the easiest way of doing this fight though, so go for charges between her combos while trying to parry as much as you can. We want to go into phase 2 with 4 full bars of Fable though, so don't be using that Fable attack in the second half of the fight. And now for phase 2, which is the hard bit. But as I promised, this is probably the easiest way to do this fight on any build, as we can deal with 75% of our health bar by only learning the timings of one single attack. At the start of the fight, back up so you're right against the fog gate. If you want a visual cue, parry the orbs as soon as you see them pass this line on the ground in front of you. At the end of the combo, she will do a flying charged attack. The way I parry this is a visual cue. A split second before she does the charge, you will see her drop down vertically very slightly. Parry as soon as you see this and you'll get it. There's also an audio cue that some of the speedrunners are using, which involves counting the beats of the backing music. I'll link to a tutorial on this in the description. Now, because we are right up against the gate, she will land right next to us instead of pushing us back as usual. This means that we can buff and hit her with a big Fable. So that's half of her health bar dealt with already, and we only need to get it down to a quarter. Now, if you were using consumables, by chucking some at her right at the start, and then now, we could already have her down to 20% health. But as I'm not doing consumables, I got stuck in with melees to get that stagger. And for that last bit of health, well, wait until she does the starting attack again. Now for the final boss of the main game, Simon. I'm still a little bit conflicted about the best strat here. Dodging and parrying both work well, but I think either way there's a couple of nasty hitboxes here that can catch you out. I went for dodging on this build as it gives you a little more time to wind up those charges. Do your best to reserve as many heals as possible for phase 2, so take this fight slow. For phase 2, I throw out the standard charged attack approach and go for R1s instead, as it just gives you a little more time to react to everything that's going on in this fight. And finally, for the secret boss of Lies of P. The reason we have been lying throughout our playthrough is that doing so enables us to fight the Nameless Puppet. For phase 1, learn the parry timings and go for charged attacks between every combo. When he staggers, you can do almost the rest of his health bar with a riposte followed by a fable. Now for phase 2, and my god, phase 2 of this boss is as hectic as it is amazing. One of the openings you're likely to get is this charged attack. Now, it might initially seem that there is no discernible wind up to this, but it does have a tell. If you watch his head closely, it twitches to the left twice. You want to parry on the second twitch. Unless you are a complete parry god, I'd say that dodging this guy is probably wiser. Stick to R1s between his attacks and don't get too greedy. When he becomes staggerable, go for the chargey to stagger, but don't take a follow-up or a riposte. Buff up and hit him with a full fable. And that's it. How to wreck everything in Lies of P. Hopefully this video might get a few more of you to the end of this incredible game. I definitely want to make some more flashy builds in this game, so if there's something you'd like to see covered, do let me know in the comments. As always, thanks for watching. See you soon.